Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be with you today. I'm sorry that is actually one of the third talk before the lunch, and it is yet another hour that you have to be exposed to contents. But I think that I will also maybe try, at least attempt bringing it all together. I am very thankful to Alessandra making us aware of how social interaction is very special and also very important. I am also thankful to Britta, who will follow up actually on some contents that I will point to. And there is not only a content relation, but also emotional relation. So Alessandra, Britta and me, we were on a project together with Michael. He's a very nice colleague, and we are thinking about exciting projects together. And Britta is a colleague and friend of mine, so you know how we are connected a little bit. I am a development psycholinguist. Basically, language acquisition is the area of my specialization. But when I am talking to linguists, I am also not perceived as a linguist because I am very much concerned with interaction. And interaction is a complex matter, cannot be formalized yet so well, and is multimodal. So that's why I'm a little bit exotic even within linguists. I would like to take you today to a tour. Let's think in frames, so frames that are patterns of interaction and patterns that very nicely connect to what Michael was showing just before. Any type of action reaching a goal causes or drops a pattern that we can pick up and basically follow on it. So not thinking out of the box, but in the contrast. So let's think in frames. So let's stay in a frame. I will try it with the concept of pragmatic frames that I would like to introduce to you, capturing the collaborative and multimodal nature of language use and interaction. I will provide a little bit of empirical evidence and then point to methodological challenges of this concept, which are huge. And this is why, just a fun fact, between Britta and I, together with colleagues that you will just see in a second, are trying since, I don't know, 2015 to get a project of pragmatic frames, but it is so difficult to really convey the reviewers about the idea. So methodological challenges are huge as well. What is the concept of pragmatic frames? Why frames? Why this pattern that is of interest for us? We have developed this road together, or we are on this way together. So Britta Frede, Annalisa Vollmer, and Pierre-Yves Audayer, we originally in the 2016 paper, we addressed and really elaborated on the concept that was actually already known from developmental psychology, the concept of pragmatic frame. What is it exactly? Okay. Imagine you are in an elevator, takes you up, and there is another person there. The elevator stops at one level, and the person is looking at you. So we have the gaze at a partner. And now is the question, what is actually the meaning of a person gazing at you? Maybe you can give me the answer. You are in an elevator. The elevator stops. And the person is looking at you. What does it mean?
Maybe they are expecting me to
Exactly. So as we know from Alexandra from today morning, gazing is very powerful, very meaningful, and actually predicts already something that would happen. That is even more, that is considered as a goal. So this arriving at a level is considering a goal. And I am looked at because the person thinks, oh, the elevator stops, so I am not going out, but you are probably going out, yeah? So this is your goal. I'm expecting you, predicting that you are going out. Of course, so here is the behavior of the partner gazing at me. There's the interaction, there is behavior of me. If I stay in the elevator, that's fine, but when this is really my goal, then I will leave the elevator, and the person would be right in predicting me arriving, reaching the goal, and going out. From this one moment, actually, you can see that this is not only about the behavior gazing at me, but it is about constructing a whole frame of acting and behaving. So it is, there are some multimodal behavior. We are going in the elevator together. We are then pushing the right button to arrive at the level. And then the elevator stops, and then there is the gazing interaction, which is really meant to or focused towards the joint goal. And the goal in this example with the elevator is really to arriving at a level. So this is basically what a pragmatic frame is about, and you can see them around you, and you can see them also very specific in what Michael was pointing to. Basically, just motor sensory frames are also present. So you are opening a drawer, you are opening a box. You can basically acquire the data of many persons, how they are doing it. And they might be individual differences, but somehow they are very stable structure into that. So some parts, element of the behaviors will be individual and peculiar and so on, but some will be stable because you need to arrive to reach your goal. So to open a box, you need to get it open at the end, right? So no matter with the foot or with the elbow, with your nose, whatever, but you need to open it. And pragmatics frame, in the concept of pragmatic frames, differentiate between means, so whether it is foot or elbow or your nose, you are opening the box, or is it a deep structure? So what are the stable elements in the whole event that you actually need to do, to achieve? Okay, I was trying to, in my studies, mostly with children and their parents, I was trying to assess or to get an idea about how children learn actually such pragmatic frames. Not that I arrived at the answer to tell you that, but I wanted to just mention what I was looking at. So we were looking at interpersonal synchrony and collaboration, because we noticed that interaction is deeply about really coupling and synchronizing. So you see that when two persons are interacted, not maybe in the elevator, because this is not what they really establish as a joint goal, but when you have people, for example, discussing or working on a task jointly, Then you see a lot of alignments between them. You see even that the heart rate is aligning to the other person, the breathing. So you see a lot of interpersonal synchrony, interpersonal, so between the collaborators. But you also see, and this is also important, a lot of intrapersonal synchrony. They are basically patterns, individual patterns that we favor and that we apply when you are your favorite way of drinking your coffee, your favorite way of opening a box, and so on and so on. You do it in an individual way. You synchronize your movements with each other, and even when you talk, you choose formulations and words that link together also with your gestures. So there are a lot of intrapersonal synchrony, and when I will come to methodological challenges, I will also show you how they can be captured. It's very interesting. Also, we noticed that, for example, in the interaction with young children, just to get them, to engage them, because they need a lot of very salient signals to be sent. People will synchronize almost everything they can communicate with just to get children engaged, so especially younger children. And I think Britta will mention some work on that. You can see it, for example, that language and movements are synchronized just to reinforce each other. So you get a really huge package. You can get it via unwrapping the language or unwrapping the motion. So it's a lot of redundancy actually in the signal. That's clearly contrasts with a very linguistic view on what actually reference and meaning is of an action. So let's consider a linguistic signal at the word ball. And in classical view, actually this word would be linked or mapped onto a concept. So the classical view is, okay, I know the word ball, because it evokes a mental image in my mental representation. Let's take the word representation. And I can just map it to it. So I can map the representation onto the word that was just mentioned, and I know what the meaning is then. And I can use the meaning in my follow-up action. So that's the classical view on reference, on meaning resolution. But you see what a huge difference it is when you consider basically labeling or just one word. The ball could be just one part of a whole sequence that is performed with children or with a partner. So, for example, here with my colleague Vivian Heller, we did a micro-analysis longitudinally, so how different actually it is when children grow, and what do actually the parents do when they would like to label something and get the child involved in a reference act. So the point, for example, there is the following. So children are, of course, engaging, and they are reacting, of course, to cues as well. So this is clearly a cue, so a social cue, but it is not just a behavior. It is interesting, it is attractive, because you are probably expecting that a whole sequence of events will follow. So it is not a cue that, just alert you and then you are ready to learn, but it is a cue because you are expecting some events to come. So it is a follow-up of events that are now expected. Okay, so the parent might point that the child is following, but needs to figure out what is actually my searching space? So what could actually my parent, my mom or dad is referring to? Then the parent is monitoring it. Then a label might actually help as well the child to get to the right object of search. And there is then the construction of the right referent mentally. So the whole sequence of behaviors. Once more, sorry to emphasizing it more. It is not just one behavior that is leading to the constructing of the referent. It is the whole sequence of joint behavior that is needed to construct the referent for the child. And it is tailored for a very specific goal, for establishing reference. And if you get this, and children get it a lot while doing everyday activities with parents, and no matter what activities you actually experience or analyze with children, but maybe some of you have children, you can just simulate now in what kind of activities you label objects or would like the child to pay attention to some objects, to their reference. When actually you introduce a referent, and there are many activities. So this frame is repeated a lot in different contexts, in many, many contexts. But it is quite stable, so it is always mostly about pointing or showing or holding something. So the means might be different, how to attract attention. But actually the jobs and the structure is quite stable and remains the same. So it is about the establishing reference. Vivian Heller and I did the micro-analysis, and we were able to identify some very particular jobs that contribute to the stable structure. And if you are interested in the jobs, you can just look into the article. It's on frontiers in development psychology, in psychology. But I won't go into the details here to the jobs. But just to wrap it up, it is about a stable structure, and the jobs need to be done together. So what is pragmatic frames? What is in a pragmatic frame? So it is an interaction protocol. It is a pattern. It is established over time and within participants. It needs to be repeated. There is wonderful work by Jerome Bruner, also Tomasello, with joint attention. Maybe you know Tomasello, Michael Tomasello a lot, because he coined the term joint attention a lot. Bruner was actually even before summarizing the phenomenon and pointing us to the fact that frames get established when they get repeated in different contexts. So repetition is crucial to the patterns to occur. And that's the same for a robot. It needs to be a lot repeated. Okay, and this involves, the pattern or pragmatic frame involves multimodal behavior and cognitive operations. This is something that I just point to, because this is not only, of course, behavior, but just this construing a referent at the end. This is something that is really about semantics. It needs to be represented then in the mind. So it's not just about perception and that's it. It's really about a cognitive operation, cognitive effort at the end. But it's a mix of behavior and cognitive effort. And very importantly, it's co-constructed towards a goal. And this co-constructed towards a goal is something that I would like emphasize once more with the following sum up. There are definitely some functional effects of co-constructive interaction. So this is not only about, you know, the old model of communication. There is a sender and a receiver and the communication going back and forth between them. And there are different means of communication. I am just against this very simplified view and holding up the co-constructive view on interaction, because there are interaction changes cognition. Basically, when people come together for the purpose of interaction, they are not the same as if they would perform the action by themselves. It is even, and that's remarkably interesting, it's even in young infants, you can see that, I think this is a neuroscience, scientific studies, that the neurological activities are different when the children perceive an object just by, you know, when they are left by themselves, or when there is a person present and just played with the object and then let the infant just gazing, perceiving the object, and the person is staying close to her or him. And in this moment, the perception of the object is a different one. So there is interaction-specific brain activities. There are shared representations definitely coming out from the interaction and the facilitated object perception when other person is present. So interaction changes us, changes our cognition. And it changes also our behavior. So there's a coupling and constraints in individuals' movements, speaking to a synergy, new unit that is effective. This is something that Fusaroli, as well as my colleague Joanna Rączaszek-Leonardi, is emphasizing so much. So this is the interaction is constraining us, maybe because of the frames, maybe because we are not just free to, you know, behave whatever we would like to, but the frames, the social roles and so on, they are constraining us. They are mechanisms for engaging in and sustaining stable interactions, like alignments. But also, very importantly, we are not mimicking each other. So it is not about finding out how the other person is moving and then I can do the same and that's interaction. It's not like that. And I mean, whoever from you dances knows that dancing is also not about mimicking each other, unless you are line dancing. But it is more about complementing each other, okay? So it's really about complementing direction. And this is the complementary coordination. I really, if you are interested, just literature, Reta and more, it's an impressive study. Fusaroli et al. Is also very nice theoretical view on it. So, in terms of knowledge representation, what can we take out of it? How can we wrap it up? Okay. Pragmatic frames are about remembering the sequence of events. And there is actually a group, Devachi and Dubrow, I hope I pronounced them well. It's quite an old paper because 7 years already old, but I found it very insightful in terms of how does it connect to the concept of frames and to pattern, sensory motor pattern, but also interactional pattern. They concentrate on sensory motor pattern, but you can extend it in some way to interaction. So they point to some important representations that are specifically, obviously, meant to remember a sequence of events. Why? Because if you remember the sequence of events, then some elements of the sequence will function as a trigger to predict the outcome. And will give you also kind of stability, so you know what all events are about. So learning the sequential order of events allow us to form predictions and plan upcoming actions. It's really essential. This is a developmental study that just showing that we are benefiting from repetition. So when children repeat some frames of playing, even playing with the same toys, they were found to, it was not an interactive study at all. So they were left, one group of children were playing always with the same set of toys, let's say like a farm, and the other police station was playing with different settings. And the one that was staying stable with the toys was found to be more verbal with the time. So they interpret the repetition benefits of the repetitions as freeing cognitive resources. So when you are repeatedly experiencing something, you are being an expert on what's coming up. You can plan with little effort, you can predict all the elements, and then you have free resources for cognitive higher functions and operations. For example, I'm now thinking spontaneously about my son. He is attempting to get his driver license, and he was, firstly, of course, he had to drive again a very normal car, but then he switched to an automated car and was so happy I could verbalize, and it was such a release to not to be focused on what you have to do, but to see all the people on the streets. So, okay. So yeah, it's freeing, giving you resources, certainly, and I think as a last point on that slide, knowledge representation, pragmatic frame is a larger unit, mental unit. It's not just one behavior, not a cue, not something, a meaning, but it's definitely a larger unit. So I put them together. So you saw this as person A and person B, but now they are put together, but because they are co-constructed. I am truly convinced that if there is a representation of pragmatic frames in our minds, it's like that, and not what is my part and what is the partner's part. It's a combination. I always can derive and even scaffold when I see the partner is not doing the right thing in the sequence. I can scaffold, or I can take the responsibility at this place. And there is, of course, the goal that is marked here, very important. Okay, I think you got the most difficult theoretical part and the ideas about the pragmatic frames. Now I would have some empirical evidence to support the pragmatic frames. So just to maybe provide you with some studies on how children are coping with it, how parents are doing it. And I think that the empirical levels, or empirical evidence, I structured it along these 4 points. Goal-directedness, because I just mentioned that the goal, the joint target, is very important. Partner awareness, how does it change your cognition? Interpersonal exchange and synchrony, and sequentialized organization for language learning. This is something that I might skip even. Okay, let's go to the goal-directedness. Quite a old study already, but done with a lot of pain in data acquisition. 17 mother-infant children accessed or visited in their homes doing diaper changing. And we just wanted to see, because diaper changing is a frame, okay, so it is a very stable, something needs to be done, you can imagine. And its deep structure is quite stable, so how they are doing, what they are doing. 6 months we visited the family. So this is very young child, 3 months old. And just to provide you how mothers frame the whole random actions into something meaningful. So you will see, I will show you the movie in a second, you will see how it by coincidence touches the diaper here. So it is really, the child is randomly, I don't know whether this is right, but it's moving, okay? It's moving. A lot of body motion that are typical to an infant, and then touches suddenly, by coincidence for sure, the diaper. And the mom is perceiving it very well. So she's all the time she's monitoring what the baby is actually doing. And then she is interpreting this, and saying, yes, you can start by holding the diaper. So even the child certainly didn't want to become an assistant. She or he is now an assistant, or just announced to be assistant. And this is something that is really so typical to parent-child interaction. They will provide a frame. They will provide a meaning to those random accidental actions. So the mother responds very contingently, so very much in time with what the child is doing, interprets the action within the context of ongoing activities, labels the object and the child's actions, and even more, she affords the child's further action. So it is not that the child is now, out of the frame, no. He or she is an assistant, and being an assistant means something. So she or he is ascribed even a role in this whole frame. And now the child gets it into the hand and needs to hold it at least, right? So that's the assistive role. So the child's further actions are afforded by mother's reaction. He or she is given the diaper to hold and perceive it. And that's the way the parents are imposing actually all the time meaning, goals, and so on onto the child's action. So maybe it is like the robot that is not knowing anything, but once you impose the meaning to it, then it can be knowledgeable then. Okay, don't worry, we save the privacy, of course. But it's once more, so you know how the diaper gets into the child's hand. The verbal action is actually not very important, so don't worry about the sound. So mother's reaction is contingent, child is given a cultural content for his action, and this is something that Joanna Ronczacek-Leonardi labels as making sense of an action sequence in an acting system. Okay, let's go to the partner awareness. Amazing studies showing the following. So this is a study with also 3-month-olds by Vasu Reddy, and she showed on an intelligent mat, so the children were lying on an intelligent mat that was recording their postures, postural changes, so she could see and analyze how they are behaving or providing movements, body movement in those two conditions. And in the one condition, they were just lying by their own, and in the other condition, there is a person approaching them. And what they are doing is mostly, they are really already anticipating the goal of being held, being taken up. And you see here really some adjustments. So they will stretch the legs or whatsoever, be prepared, or even sometimes, with older children, it is the other way around. So when they don't want to be put into a stroller, for example, they will resist, so they will make themselves so big you cannot fold them into the stroller anymore. So this is the other way around. So they anticipate the frame and resist. So 3-month-olds show systematic postural adjustment in interaction, and only when really somebody is turning to them, so they anticipate already the goal, that they will be picked up and they contribute to the goal. This is the crucial thing. They co-construct the goal already with their body postural adjustments. Another study that was done by Ramazzoni and Liszkowski, Ulf Liszkowski, and has done a lot of studies about pointing. What is it? How pointing is actually as a behavior, as a part of a larger unit. And in this condition, in this study, you see an experimenter providing, let's call it a tray, on which there is something interesting for the children. And this is clearly far out of reach, or at reach, or within at reach. And when the parent is present, you see that even far out of reach, children will point a lot, or will try to reach out for the objects, because they know that the parent will actually contribute to the toy as well. So if they see, okay, I can get it with the help of the other person, then they will reach out and they will point. But otherwise, they point only when it is really close to their reach area. So another empirical evidence about the partner awareness. I am doing something else when I have a partner to do it. Using a social signal and for interaction, and infants expect that a partner will adapt and complete their goal. Co-construction, again, completeness of the goal is possible with the partner. Interpersonal exchange, synchrony. So there is evidence that, the universal turn-taking behavior, that the turn-taking behavior is universal, that there is a rhythmic coordination. I mentioned it already at the beginning of the talk, between the listener's movement and the speech and movement of the speaker. There's evidence of interactional synchrony between neonates and adults. So even in neonates, they can already, rhythmically adjust, and a precise and flexible temporal and prosodic coordination between the vocal expression of mother and infant. So you can see it on different modalities, movement, vocal coordination, and you can see that in infants who are defined as being having troubles or being different in social interaction, let's really say they are not impaired, but they are they differently perceive a social interaction. And in infants with autism, smiles are present but not contingent, so they will not react so contingently to an interaction with their smile as the typically developed children. But the problem is with all the studies on interpersonal synchrony that they are mostly unimodal. So they look at one behavior, vocal gestures, this and that, and this is always about one channel. But there is a multimodal coupling of it. And you can see just here, just maybe you can, because probably the sound won't work that well, you can see what the mother is actually saying by tracking her mouth and how she is moving her body. So that's the multimodal coupling here. So every time she has something to do, she will be like leaning forward. So that's really a very rich signal that she is providing. Okay, so we had a look at the speech stream and what the infant is doing, and we notice, for example, that the speech stream and gaze of the infant were extremely well coordinated. The mother was verbally active when the child was looking at her. So there were definitely some kind of correlations or even synchrony. At 3 months, coupling is easy because, and this is nature, because the infants are looking at the caregiver most at the time. So this is their preference. They are born with a preference for faces, human faces, but also different faces are doing, like cats' faces are also doing well. But they are preferring, their preference is on faces, and they are really looking at their parents mostly of the time. At 6 months of age, the challenge for the parents is really to find the right slot. So the infants are moving a lot and looking at different entities, and when they are looking at the mother, then as parents, we have to provide the right information at the right moment when the child is looking. So this is getting more challenging, but again, it's very nicely that you have at least 6 months to train, and then you have the big challenge of being very attentive, monitor your infant and providing the right information in the right place. Okay. I will skip it. This is the recurrence quantification analysis dynamic system method that we use to actually analyze the coordination between the mother and the child. And we can say that there is no clear leader nor follower in a early interaction with children. And there is less recurrence, but more structure at 6 months and 8 than at 3 months of age. So the coupling is at the heart of social interaction, is a prerequisite for verbal communication, is social attention is educated. And this brings me to the last point, sequentialized organization for language learning, and I would like to mention this following study, which I found back in 2008 really very impressive. So you have the following setup. You have an experimenter gazing at one or the other object. You have 4 conditions, I will come to that, but the starting point that the experimenter is looking down, and then after doing something, she is then gazing at one or the other object. The main question is, will the infant follow the gaze? Yeah? Or under what circumstances will the infant follow the gaze? We have 4 conditions. We have a condition in which the experimenter is just looking at the child. We call it as ostensive condition, just hello. I mean, she is not saying hello, but really her eyes are saying it. Then you see something blinking up because you could say, well, eyes are so salient, they are really very dominant, prominent, so we need something else. But here the experimenter is looking down, but something else will pop up. And then we will have another condition, this is infant-directed speech. She is not actually looking at the baby, but addressing it verbally, like hello. So you have a huge variation in this hello, which is also an ostensive cue. And then you have just an adult hello, so no variation, no ostension in the pitch. And the question here is, under what condition will the infant, and we are talking about young infants, 6 months old, will follow the gaze, and it is only when the ostensive, or mostly ostensive condition, now we have this one. 6 months old follow the gaze only or mostly in the ostensive condition. So there seemed already to be a frame established. So when they hear one element of it, like the gaze or the infant-directed speech, they know what to do, and they will then follow, find the right behavior to perform. So infants understand a framing as a learning situation. Infants couple to the partner only in a sequence consisting of a particular behavior. And I think that those examples suffice. I will come briefly to the methodological challenges. As I mentioned already, with my critical point, the synchronization is more about one modality. So what happens when I have vocalization and vocalization? But what when I would like to look at more channels, how to assess it? And there is actually at least one attempt in which we did it with pattern data mining on multimodal turn-taking. So I would like just to point to that. And we found a lot of intrapersonal synchrony. So mother gazes at infant, and then she smiles, then she speaks. So this pattern together will lead to mother speaks. So mother gazes at infants, then she smiles, and she speaks. So such pattern were possible. Okay, I will keep it to further discussion. If you are interested in how we actually identify pragmatic frames, I can only say that we are doing it bottom up. So we are looking at maybe very similar to what Michael was presenting. We are actually collecting the data, how children perform some things. For example, here in this video, you see that Caroline is actually shown an object, and she will take it, and then she is requested to say how is the object, what is the object's label. And we are looking at many children, how they do it. And at those places in which there are individual variations, we are identifying them as jobs that the children obviously have to hit or not, and trying to really establish a pattern. So we are trying out of the errors and individual ways of doing something, we are trying to generalize a protocol that everybody can hold to. Okay, so I think future would be how to implement pragmatic frames, scaling up the concept of pragmatic frames to more complex behavior, like explaining or giving feedback, and actually how to implement pragmatic frames. That was a paper that Anna wrote with us on that, and if you are interested, I just would like to point to that. Thank you very much for sticking with me.
Any questions?
There's definitely time for lunch.
I think. No, I think so. One question. And there's another one, but now Benjamin is faster.
Thank you for the awesome talk. One question that immediately came to mind is with the baby studies. Why did you choose mother-baby interaction in particular? And so I would say I have a hypothesis that there's something about babies that makes them very nice to study, but I would just like to know what you think that is.
Is your question about the mothers, so why we focused on mothers, or really about child-mother-parent interaction?
Both, I guess.
Okay, so this is really problematic. If you would like to link in development psychology to studies that exist, you need to study mothers, because this is the stereotype in child interaction. We did also fathers, and Britta will report a study in which 50% at least were fathers, and we didn't see a difference, basically, right? So And there are actually also studies assessing the biochemical structure in the body when somebody, no matter who, is interacting with a child. And there are hormones that are freed, and you can actually measure that it's something about a child, no matter who is interacting actually with the child. Yeah. And what is fascinating about children is because this is growing cognition, so how they actually develop, how they change, and because you could assume everything is inborn and they need just interaction to free their resources. Everything is already programmed in, but this is not the way I believe it is, or the constructivist view on language or development is. And they would like to see what are the developmental mechanisms that really drive the developing cognition.
Thank you for the fascinating talk. I have a question about the pragmatic frames and whether they are static or dynamic. So I was thinking the example of the elevator, and okay, if we are two people that we are unknown to each other, that's exactly what would happen. But let's imagine that we meet every day at that time. The situation is changing, or I don't know, if we start to hear the fire alarm blaring, and the situation changes. So how these are affected not only by the current context, but maybe the previous shared experience that the two members in the situation of.
Definitely, Alessandra, this is the core problem also, because you have the feeling that we are quite flexible in the pragmatic frames. We can shape them, we can change them, and so on and so on. So I don't know an answer to that. They definitely are. We as adults are playing with them very consciously in changing them, shaping them. But for children, I would say they need quite a stable structure. And you see a lot in institution caring for children that they will, the ground is to have very stable structure so they can predict every kind of activity within it. And I think this is exactly the right way to really, pedagogically guide children also to other activities. But when does it change in the development? When does a child also become creative? I don't know yet. So it is definitely a very important topic. Maybe also a topic that you need have in parallel in mind.
Thank you.
Okay. There's chance for one further question, but if there's no one, feel free, have a lunch. Thank you for your talk. Maybe you can approach Katharina during lunch. So thank you for your talk and for all your attention. So.